The sky over Epsilon 7 bled for exactly 42 seconds. There were no explosions, no blazing light of a dying star. Just a subtle fracture, a red line slashing across the firmament like a freshly opened scar on the skin of the universe. All sensors on the Helios orbital station went silent at the same time, picking up a single pulse of energy that defied any scientific explanation. Within that brief moment, thousands of people forgot who they were. Names, faces, memories, all wiped away and then restored as if nothing had happened. Nothing, except for a transmission that echoed on a frequency that should never have existed. "You forgot about us." Lieutenant Kaelen was among the few who didn't forget anything, or maybe it was the opposite. Perhaps she was one of the rare people who remembered something that should never have existed. While everyone else returned to normal, she felt the echo of the message vibrating in her mind like a hidden memory. The Federation authorities tried to cover up the event, labeling it as a communication anomaly, but Kaelen knew it wasn't just a technical glitch. There was a presence within those words, something watching through the veil of reality, something that wanted to be found. Determined to uncover the truth, Kaelen sought the help of Dr. Ariane Voss, a temporal linguistics expert expelled from the Federation for theories considered dangerously subversive. Voss was obsessed with hidden patterns and space-time anomalies, and the message from Epsilon 7 seemed written directly for him. Analyzing the data, he discovered that the signal didn't come from a specific point in space but from an impossible place. A hole in the very timeline of the galaxy. A void where, officially, nothing had ever existed. Following the anomalous coordinates, Kaelen and Ariane traveled to a forbidden zone in the interstellar sector, where they found a space station forgotten by history itself. A corroded metal colossus floating in orbit around a planet not listed in any stellar records. As they walked through its empty corridors, they heard echoes of human voices calling for help, but Federation records claimed the facility had been decommissioned over a century ago. The most disturbing part, among the voices recorded in the security systems, was Kaelen's, pleading desperately for help in a tone she had no memory of ever using. At the station's core, they discovered an enigmatic artifact, a black prism floating above a suspended platform, pulsing in sync with their heartbeats. There were no records of its origin, but when Kaelen approached, it responded. The light within the prism revealed something that froze Ariane's blood. A holographic projection showing Kaelen in a future she had never lived, in a place she had never seen, screaming the same words from the original transmission. "You forgot about us." But the most alarming part wasn't what she was saying. It was who she was saying it to, because somehow she was speaking directly to them. The artifact pulsed with a hypnotic cadence, each beat synchronized with Kaelen's heartbeat, as if it were mapping her very essence. Ariane, with his clinical and skeptical gaze, tried to rationalize the phenomenon, but even he knew this went beyond any known scientific explanation. The prism seemed more like a window than an object, a rift into something beyond human comprehension. When Kaelen reached out her hand, the artifact responded, projecting a sequence of unknown symbols interspersed with images of places that seemed to exist outside of space and time. The station's records were corrupted, but Ariane managed to recover fragments of an old transmission. Desperate voices, muffled screams, and among them, the repetitive sound of a code that Ariane recognized as a temporal pattern. Not a conventional message, but a marker, as if someone was trying to anchor a specific event within the fabric of reality. The most disturbing part was that the code matched exactly the signal that had slashed across the sky of Epsilon 7. Someone or something was trying to restore a memory the universe itself had tried to erase. As they explored the station's dark corridors, Kaelen began experiencing lapses in perception. At certain moments, her surroundings subtly shifted, lights flickering in different rhythms, shadows moving against the logic of their light sources, and reflections that didn't match her movements. The peak of this dissonance came when she saw her reflection in a metallic panel, but it didn't mimic her. Instead, the image smiled back with an empty gaze and murmured, "You're not supposed to be here." The shock nearly made her lose her balance. Ariane theorized that the artifact wasn't just a communication device but a catalyst for alternate realities. Perhaps the station had been built to study these anomalies, or more likely, to contain them. The prism seemed to be an anchor for a version of Kaelen that existed in a parallel timeline, a version that was somehow trying to communicate with or even replace the Kaelen he knew. The idea was absurd, but the evidence was right in front of them, pulsing with cold, silent light. Determined to understand the station's purpose, they accessed a sealed vault at the center of the complex. Inside, they found records dating back over 100 years, describing an experiment called Project Palimpsest, a secret Federation initiative to rewrite undesirable events in galactic history. The project involved using technology to manipulate not just time but large-scale perceptions of reality itself. The experiment's failure resulted in a collapse of overlapping realities, and the station was abandoned, or so it seemed. Project Palimpsest hadn't completely failed. The artifact was the remnant of an attempt to erase an event that was never meant to happen. But something went wrong. Instead of erasing, it had created echoes, fragments of people and memories trapped between the folds of spacetime. And Kaelen was one of those fragments. She began to question whether her own existence was real or just a persistent anomaly from a timeline that should have been erased. Before they could process the revelation, the station reacted to the artifact's awakening. The lights flickered, ancient alarms blared, and doors began sealing shut automatically, as if the structure itself was trying to contain them. A fragmented, originless automated voice repeated in an impersonal tone, "Anomaly detected. Correction process initiated." They ran to escape, but as the doors slammed shut behind them, Kaelen heard one final phrase echo through the empty corridors. "You belong to the void." Fleeing the collapsing station, Kaelen and Arion returned to their ship in silence, both lost in thoughts neither dared to share. The space around them seemed darker than before, and it wasn't just an impression. Stars that should have been there simply weren't. The universe felt incomplete, as if pieces of it had been erased. Arion, unable to accept the idea of a cosmic mistake, began analyzing the data from Project Palimpsest, trying to find a pattern, a logical explanation. But all he found were gaps, holes not in the information, but in reality itself. Kaelen, on the other hand, began feeling changes within herself. Her memories were fragmenting, blending with recollections of lives she'd never lived. Scenes of battles on unknown planets, conversations with people she'd never met, even the physical sensations of wounds her body had never suffered. She started questioning whether any part of her life was real, or if she was merely a remnant of something that should have been erased. The fear wasn't of losing her identity, it was the possibility that she'd never truly had one to begin with. Arion suggested that the artifact had activated something within her. A persistent echo, as he called it, a remnant of an alternate version of herself that refused to disappear. To test this hypothesis, they traveled to a nearby planet known for having intact historical records spanning over 1,000 years. There, they accessed a universal data archive and searched for Kaelen Dor. The result was devastating. Her name didn't exist. No records of her family, her military career, nothing. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air. Determined to understand her own nature, Kaelen explored the ruins of an old Federation facility where, according to Arion, the first experiments of Project Palimpsest had taken place. The site was in ruins, but what they found there was even more disturbing. Abandoned cryogenic pods, some of them still functioning. Inside one of them, Kaelen saw herself. A body identical to hers in suspended animation with scars she didn't have. The shock was so intense it nearly made her faint. Arion, though shaken, maintained his rationality. He theorized that Kaelen wasn't a person in the conventional sense but an iteration, a version of an experiment that had escaped the deletion planned by Project Palimpsest. This would explain her fragmented memories and her connection to the artifact. But for Kaelen, it meant something much deeper. She had never had a real life. Everything she remembered was just a set of data imprinted on her mind, a script written by someone she'd never met. The discovery caused a rift between them. Kaelen pulled away, plunged into an existential crisis. If she wasn't real, what was the purpose of continuing to exist? Arion tried to reach her, arguing that consciousness is what defines existence, not its origin. But Kaelen was beyond logic. She felt a pain Arion could never understand. the emptiness of being nothing more than a shadow of a life that was never hers. Deep down, she feared an even crueler truth. Maybe the universe was trying to correct her because, in fact, she was never meant to exist. But before she could completely lose herself in her own despair, a new transmission interrupted her thoughts. It was the same voice from the station, but this time the message was different. You are not the error. You are the key. The signal came from a point in space where there should have been nothing, and somehow Kaelen knew exactly where to go. Not because she remembered, but because it was part of who she was, or what she had been created to be. Following the new signal, Kaelen and Arion traversed a region of space known as the Quran Void, a stretch where not even starlight dared to penetrate. It was a dead space, or at least it should have been. However, as they approached the coordinates, the stars around the ship began to distort, warped like reflections in a shattered mirror. Space seemed to fold in on itself, creating the illusion that they were traveling in circles, even though the ship maintained a straight course. And at the center of this disturbance, there was something that shouldn't exist. A city floating in the vacuum, built with impossible architecture, buildings defying gravity, streets curving at angles that broke the very logic of physics. Upon landing, they realized the city wasn't empty. There were people, or what seemed to be people, walking its streets. Familiar faces, but with subtle, unsettling differences. Swapped-eye colors, scars that never existed, hollow expressions. Kaelen saw versions of herself at different ages, living lives she'd never experienced. It was like walking through a shattered mirror, each fragment reflecting an alternate version of her existence. Arion watched in silence, struggling to maintain his rationality, but even he couldn't ignore the fact that they were in a place where the very concept of reality had been deconstructed. At the city's center stood a colossal tower, its structure pulsing with a light that seemed alive. Inside, they encountered a being that defied description, a form constantly shifting, taking on the faces and voices of people they knew. It was the Concordance, not a singular entity, but a collective consciousness formed from the echoes of lost realities. It explained that Kaelen wasn't an error but a necessary anomaly, accidentally created by Project Palimpsest yet crucial to the stability of the multiverse. Her existence was the very thing preventing the total collapse of alternate realities. The Concordance offered a choice. Kaelen could merge with it, becoming a permanent anchor for realities, ensuring the collapse would never happen again. This would mean losing her individuality, her memories, and her humanity. Arion protested, insisting there had to be another solution, but Kaelen knew this choice was hers alone. For the first time, she felt she had control over her own existence. It didn't matter if she had been created by accident. What mattered was what she did with the time she had. As she contemplated her decision, Kaelen was confronted by alternate versions of herself, some confident, others desperate. They represented all the possibilities of who she could have been. In a moment of clarity, Kaelen realized that her true strength didn't come from being real or false, but from the ability to choose, to define her own identity. She refused the Concordance's offer, deciding that her existence didn't need validation from a cosmic purpose. She was enough on her own. This decision had an unexpected effect. Instead of collapsing, the realities began to stabilize, as if Kaelen's very act of asserting her individuality was the balance needed. The Concordance didn't disappear but changed, becoming less of a conscious entity and more of a reflection of Kaelen herself, an echo of her choice. Arion, both relieved and awed, realized he had underestimated the power of free will in a universe seemingly governed by immutable laws. They left the floating city, now a silent monument to the complexity of existence. The space around them felt sharper, the stars brighter, as if the universe itself had breathed a sigh of relief. Kaelen wasn't an anomaly or a lost variable. She was living proof that reality isn't defined by what is fixed, but by what is possible. And as the ship drifted away from that impossible place, one final transmission echoed through the void. Reality is what you choose to keep. After leaving the floating city, Kaelen and Arion felt the vastness of space in a different way. The universe seemed silent, but not empty. It was a silence heavy with possibilities, as if each star held a secret only they could understand. Yet, something lingered in Kaelen's gaze, a sensation of being watched, not by something external but by echoes of herself, fragments of a consciousness that now coexisted with her own. What started as a whisper grew clearer. She hadn't just refused the concordance, she had brought part of it with her. While Arion tried to decipher the nature of this new connection, Kaelen began to manifest abilities that defied logic. She could sense fractures in reality, foresee subtle shifts in the flow of time, and, in moments of high tension, influence events around her. It wasn't complete control, but more like a fine-tuned resonance with the fabric of the universe itself. This didn't come without a cost. Each time she used these abilities, she felt more disconnected from linear reality, as if part of her was always somewhere else, living other possibilities simultaneously. Determined to understand what was happening, they traveled to an old Federation research station, abandoned after experiments with temporal singularities. There, they found records from scientists who had tried to manipulate alternate realities but failed to contain the consequences. The most disturbing discovery was a holographic journal from one of the researchers, describing an entity called the Mirror of Eternity, a phenomenon that reflected not who you are, but all the versions of who you could have been. The journal ended abruptly with one final message: the mirror doesn't show the future, it decides. Arion theorized that the concordance wasn't the true danger. It was just a symptom of something greater, the mirror of eternity itself, a fundamental anomaly existing outside of space and time, influencing events to maintain a balance no one fully understood. If Kaelen was now connected to it, it meant her existence wasn't a flaw or an accident but a key piece in a cosmic game far older than the Federation itself. Kaelen began having visions of places she'd never been, of civilizations that never existed, and of versions of herself in situations beyond comprehension. She saw herself as a rebel leader, a lone explorer, even a villain in realities where her choices led her down darker paths. These visions started to affect her sanity, blurring the lines between real memories and mere possibilities. Arion, desperate to help her, suggested that the only way to understand the connection was to confront it directly. They set a course for the most unstable gravitational anomaly in the galaxy, a place known as Kaelen's Knot, where the laws of physics folded in on themselves. There, they believed they could find the mirror of eternity or at least understand its true nature. As they approached, the space around them began to fracture. The ship itself seemed to exist in multiple versions simultaneously, flickering between different realities. It was like crossing the boundary of existence itself. At the heart of Kaelen's Knot, they found something unexpected. Not an entity or an artifact, but a reflection. Not in an ordinary mirror, but on a surface of pure energy, showing Kaelen and Arion. Yet not them. It was all the possible versions of them, intertwined in a single moment. The mirror of eternity wasn't an object. It was an event, the intersection of all choices, of all possibilities. And standing before it, Kaelen finally understood. There was no right version of who she was. What mattered was who she chose to be now. Standing before the mirror of eternity, Kaelen felt stripped of all the layers that had defined her existence. There was no past, no future, no present, only the sum of all her possibilities. Each version of herself stared back with expressions ranging from compassion to indifference, and in some cases, pure contempt. Arion, beside her, saw his own variants. A hero, a traitor, a man consumed by knowledge, and even a being devoid of any remaining humanity. The reflection wasn't merely a glimpse of what they could have been. It was a confrontation with the raw essence of choice. The mirror began to expand, its edges glowing with a light that seemed to dissolve matter itself. Kaelen realized it wasn't just a static phenomenon, it was a catalyst. Every decision they made within it would echo across all possible realities, shaping not just the present but the very fabric of the multiverse. The concordance, now just a faint shadow within Kaelen's mind, whispered of a balance to be maintained, a thin line between order and chaos. But Kaelen began to doubt whether balance was truly necessary. Arion suggested destroying the mirror, believing that by removing the convergence point, they could restore a more stable linearity to the universe. But Kaelen hesitated. She saw something Arion didn't, possibilities where chaos didn't mean destruction, but freedom. The universe had always been a place of constant change, and maybe the true mistake of the Federation and Project Palimpsest was trying to control something that was never meant to be contained. What seemed like an anomaly was, in fact, evolution. As they debated, the mirror began to react, reflecting not just their images but their deepest thoughts and hidden fears. Kaelen saw a future where her choice led to the collapse of entire civilizations, but also one where she sparked a new era of infinite possibilities. Arion saw a world where absolute control brought peace, but at the cost of freedom. The dilemma was no longer about what was right or wrong. It was about what they were willing to sacrifice. In the decisive moment, Arion tried to activate a device to destroy the mirror, believing it was the only safe path. Kaelen stopped him, not with force, but with words. She reminded him that every version of them that had failed in the past had done so out of fear. Fear of the unknown, of the uncontrollable. But maybe the true act of courage was accepting that the universe didn't need happy ending or imposed order. It needed room to grow, to fail, and to reinvent itself. Kaelen made her choice. Instead of destroying the mirror, she merged with it. Not to erase herself, but to become part of something greater, a thread woven into the very tapestry of the cosmos. She didn't disappear. She expanded, becoming an echo in all realities, a persistent reminder that free will is the true essence of existence. Arion, now alone, realized he had never lost Kaelen. She was in everything, in every decision he would make from that moment on. Arion left carrying not just Kaelen's memory, but the certainty that the universe was never a place for definitive answers. He knew that somewhere, in some reality, Kaelen was still making choices. And as he navigated the vast silence of space, one final message echoed softly in his mind. A voice he would recognize anywhere. I never left. Space remained indifferent to Arion's journey. Stars were born and died in silent cycles. Galaxies collided in cosmic dances that would last billions of years. But for him, the universe would never be the same. Kaelen was no longer by his side, but her presence was an invisible constant, like a frequency he could feel between each heartbeat. She was no longer a person confined to a body or a timeline. She was a living idea, a choice perpetuated in every reality that dared to exist beyond the predictable. Arion continued his journey, no longer searching for answers, but for experiences. He visited forgotten worlds, witnessed civilizations rise and fall, and saw firsthand how every small decision shaped the destiny of entire star systems. In every place, he found traces of what Kaelen represented. A graffiti on a wall, a ruined statue, a story whispered around starlit campfires. Even those who had never known her seemed to feel her impact. She had become a myth, a persistent echo of free will in a universe that often preferred order over uncertainty. But on silent nights, drifting alone among the stars, Arion still wondered, did she choose the right path? And in each of those reflections, he realized the question no longer made sense. The universe wasn't about definitive answers. It was about the act of questioning, of seeking, of challenging the very concept of destiny. Kaelen hadn't chosen an ending. She had chosen continuity, the perpetual motion of existence without ties, without labels. Years later, on a remote planet where time seemed to flow differently, Arion found an artifact buried beneath the red sands, a fragment of the mirror of eternity. When he touched it, he didn't see grand visions of the past or future. Instead, he heard a soft, familiar voice, almost a whisper. You are more than the choices you've made. You are what you still can choose. He smiled, not with sadness, but with a peace he had never felt before. The weight of loss gave way to the understanding that nothing is ever truly lost. Everything transforms. Arion set out once again, his ship gliding silently through the interstellar void. He knew he would never reach a final destination, because there wasn't one. The universe didn't offer conclusions, only continuities. And as the stars shimmered in the distance, he realized that the true meaning of existence wasn't in understanding the cosmos, but in living each moment as if it were eternal. Because in a way, every choice was. And in each of them, Kaelen was still there, whispering in the silence between the stars. The now is forever,